Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome you all on the presentation entitled Enviroeconomic Assessment of Hydroxy Gas in Engines. This presentation is prepared by the collective efforts of Dr. Muhammad and myself. However, I am going to give the presentation on his behalf. Before formally starting, I would like to give you people the contents on which our presentation would primarily be centered around. First, we would start with the problem statement, and in the context of the problem statement, we would identify that what potential solution do we have in order to cater that problem. And after that, we would see that once we have the solution, what technique could we apply in order to see that whether it is feasible or not. And at the last, we would have some recommendations and deductions. So formally starting, you know that Pakistan is desperately surviving to meet its energy demand. And in that scenario, the sector-wise oil consumption is very necessary to know. As you can see on the graph that is shown here, that oil consumption sector-wise, and if we see that 47%, which is a major chunk, almost about 50% is from transportation sector. It means that if we somehow contain the massive excessive use of oil in the transportation sector, it means we would be in a better position to reduce the pressure on the depleting fossil fuels. So this is basically the problem statement. Moving ahead, not only the pressure on the depleting fossil fuels, but also the environment is getting harmed by the different exhaust gases. Among many, few are mentioned here. Carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, carbon dioxide, and many more to the list. These gases are deteriorating the quality of the environment and making it difficult to survive at this earth. And among these gases, the most important one is carbon dioxide, which is largely contributing to the global warming. So we need to contain this at any cost. So if this is a bit detailed analysis of what diesel and gasoline exhaust are, and here these circle gases, as you can see, carbon dioxide both in diesel as well as in gasoline is having a major contribution of 12 and 14%. So it means that we have to reduce the pressure on the depleting fossil fuels as well as we have to contain the carbon dioxide which is emitting from vehicles. So this was the first part. Moving ahead, now we are identified the problem statement. So the next is we have to be solution oriented. It means that we have to look for the solution. And that solution could be in the form of hydroxy gas, which could be called as the fuel of the future. This slide shows the basic principle which governs the generation of hydroxy gas, which is a fuel that promises higher efficiency and a better friendly to the environment. So as we are dealing with the production of hydroxy gas as a large scale, it means that we have to look at it in a larger or broader perspective. So these are the certain factors which could definitely contribute to have a better or higher production rate, because we are dealing it with the perspective of that we are going to utilize this gas commercially in engines. So these are the few factors in which the most prominent one is the material of the electrode, which is obviously an integral part of hydroxy gas generator. So moving ahead quickly, although we have identified the potential solution, I've said that we are going to use hydroxy gas in engines, but obviously you might be thinking that can we use it with the present scenario? Yes, we don't use this gas with the present scenario. However, we need certain mild modifications in engine, and after that we would be able to utilize it in an effective and efficient way. So moving ahead, these are certain benefits of hydroxy gas. Obviously it is easy to generate, it's environmental friendly, and it is putting a less damage to the environment. So now moving the third part of the presentation, which is enviroeconomic assessment. Like once we have done with the problem statement, we have identified the solution. The next is to check whether our solution is appropriate or not. Like it's a kind of a check on that. So in order to see that, we have introduced the enviroeconomic assessment. it's basically the assessment of environmental impact that a fuel is going to have on our environment. It basically considers the economical cost associated with the environmental aspects considered in the domain of carbon dioxide emissions. So it incorporates the use of emission data, carbon pricing, which I will discuss in my next slide, and it considers the environmental impact environmentally as well as economically. So here is a bit detailed introduction of what enviroeconomic assessment is. So the carbon pricing is one of the dominant or one of the building stone of enviroeconomic analysis. What carbon pricing is, this is basically the efforts that a particular state or an organization is doing to contain the global warming. For instance, if Scandinavian countries are doing their best to control global warming, obviously the carbon pricing would be less. And if considered in the perspective of Pakistan, which is it's in developing phase, obviously the carbon pricing is going to be much higher. So these are certain mathematical foundations which we use to analyze the enviroeconomic aspect of the engine, and we consider the carbon dioxide which is emitted annually based on the power generation, and after that we just consider the carbon pricing, which is obviously variable in the regions, as I have stated earlier. So once we have determined the enviroeconomic assessment of an engine, obviously then we need to see that whether it is feasible or not. If it is causing so much cost, and if it is emitting or if it is polluting the environment, obviously we are not going for that. So here are certain graphs that we have extracted from our research. It actually shows the variation of annual carbon dioxide emission as well as the environmental cost associated with that operation of engine. So first graph on the left side, it actually shows that with increase in engine speed, obviously the carbon dioxide emissions are going to increase. And similarly, the graph on the right side, it actually shows the economical cost associated with the emission of carbon dioxide. And it means that if we are going to operate engine at a higher speed, we have to bear for that. It means we have to consider the environment in the terms of carbon dioxide emissions, which are of course high if we are operating engine at a higher speed. So this was the third part, and now moving to the last part of the presentation, which is basically the deductions. It means starting from the problem statement, identifying the potential solution, checking its feasibility, and now obviously we are coming towards the deductions. It means that we have identified the hydroxy gas as an effective source of containing off-road and on-road emissions. And the use of hydroxy gas obviously is going to have a better efficiency and reduce emissions. And similarly, it also shows that whenever you are considering a potential alternative solution, you must have to consider the enviroeconomic assessment, because that is going to play an important part. So this is all from my side. So thank you very much.